Hey, it's Ken Gagnon with YouTube channel GameBits here to play Framed. This is the new puzzle game from Loveshack, recommended to me by Susan Arndt of Joystick. I remember playing this game at PAX East and thought it was pretty cool. Then it kind of fell off my radar until just recently, and I'm so happy I remembered to play it because this game is delightful. It is vying for my top indie game of the year. It is a puzzle game based on graphic novels, and it very slowly ramps you up into how it works. So in this case, it's showing you a scene from a graphic novel, and it's suggesting that you swap these two frames, and then action occurs in the order in which you place the panels. And you can see that the spy is off and running with his briefcase. So the game starts off very easily. It shows you what happens using the default arrangement of the panels, and it asks you to rearrange them and see what happens in this new sequence. So in this case, he evades the cop. Yay! However, it does get much more difficult. So in this case, we have 4 panels. We can't rearrange the first and the last ones. And I confess that I have already played many of these levels so far. So let's go like this. I remember most of these solutions already. Now the spy will pretty much take action on whatever he comes across. So if there is a door, he will go in it. If there is a gun in the first scene, it will be fired by the third. In this case, he sneaks behind the cop, and that is a common technique in this game, is to arrange the panels so that you enter the panel in a way that the police officer will not see. And there are no deaths. Well, there are deaths, obviously. Right here you see your character dying. But you can play the level over and over as much as you'd like. So let's see what happens if I were to go like that. Probably now he'll get shot and fall into the table. Yeah, so he's so... Oh, now he gets shot. Yeah, and... Oh! Dies on the table. So let's have him jumping into the window. And let's do this. So hopefully now he'll get shot behind the table. Perfect. See? He couldn't have planned it any better. And out he goes. To the next scene. It's always useful to watch the first layout to see what would happen, because it may reveal aspects of the panels that you would not otherwise notice. So it might look like something would be fine. Bird! But then you realize that, oh, there's a detail there that I missed. This scene in particular is one I'm thinking of. So in that third panel, first column, second row, it looks fine, but if you look very closely, there's actually a crack in the edifice, and right here, oops, he falls and dies. So you want to arrange this that he's on the lower panel by the time he gets to that point. He also needs to be above this police officer. So let's have him go... Let's see. Yeah, that should do just fine. In fact, I think there may have even been 2 answers to that puzzle. I think the 4th and 5th panels might have been able to be swapped. One of the things I like about this game is the soundtrack. It fits great with the silhouetted noir theme. I saw somebody on Twitter saying that they were listening to the soundtrack while programming. They felt like a code detective. I thought that was pretty cool. My primary exposure to noir as a genre, unfortunately, is limited to the Dixon Hill holodeck programs on Star Trek The Next Generation. And that's not exactly most extensive. I haven't read a lot of novels about Sam Spade or seen the movie The Maltese Falcon, which is unfortunate. Let's see. Let's try that. So now he'll be under the police officer, and then he'll run upstairs and hop on the hook that he needs to get over the lumber. And now can he make that final jump? Yes. He does not need the hook for the final jump. So I'm going to play this through to one of the early cutscenes. Let's let's see. So he has to go, let's make him go downstairs. Let's do that last. Then that. Nope, that won't work, because then he'll run into that officer. Let's see. Yeah, let's try that. So he should go up the stairs, which means he'll come out behind that police officer. Perfect. And then he'll run back downstairs and end up in between those two officers, grab the axe and brutally murder them and chop them up into bits and pieces. Oh my god, the blood, the gore, oh my gosh. And nope, he actually takes the handle. That's one thing I found interesting, that this is actually completely, well, not completely non-violent, but there's no blood, no gore. Anytime you have the option to kill somebody, you don't. I think that's really interesting that the designers chose that sort of pacifistic approach. Obviously, your character will stop at quote-unquote nothing to win, but there always seems to be a solution that allows everybody to get out alive. And he thinks he's made it home, but no. Also very interesting, the white accoutrements that highlight the different characters, whether it is on their hat or their ties. Of course, everybody wears a tie. This is like, what, the 40s, the 50s? Maybe earlier. I'm not exactly sure what era that would be in, because like I said, I don't have a lot of experience with noir. Oh! That gotta hurt. Out he sneaks. Now, this one, you would think that, oh, the letters in the background are a clue, because whatever I rearrange it to is going to be a word, right? Right now it says Loveshack, so what else can I spell? That's not really the case, though. In my experience, there are not a lot of other words that this spells. Also notice at the very end here, the arrow is at the top, so you need to get to the top in order to win. So let's have him go over that cop, and then above. No, he has to go down. Let's have him... Let's see. I do kind of wish when I drag the panels it would just push all the others to the right instead of swapping the two tiles that I'm trying to jigger. And actually it does seem like sometimes it does do that in later stages based on the exact situation. But if this puzzle solution that I've been attempting works, then what those billboards spell are Laxi Havk, which is not a great clue. Oh well. Now later levels, as you'll see later in this video, introduce the ability to rotate various panels, so you're actually changing the direction from which you're entering the panel. And also you can reuse panels. So you can actually drag and drop stuff and have it occur multiple times. Bam! Right in the back of the head. Now the colors here are clues. Whatever color wall you walk by on the way out is where you'll be walking in. So let's try that. You want to come out on a blue panel at the very end so that you come up behind that last police officer. Remember, you can't move the first or last panel. So far, so good. Now, if I wanted to just skip ahead, I'm pretty sure I can just push the arrow button in the upper left. That either finishes the level or resets it, I forget which. Oh, this is not going to work. Because then he comes out by the orange panel and caught. Okay, but I think I almost have the solution here. So let's just try swapping those two panels. One thing I have not found, though, is a level select or chapter select. I have finished all these levels and I wanted to go back and start the game over for the purpose of this video. I actually had to delete the app from my iPad mini and then re-download it. I'm not sure that's the correct way, but there doesn't seem to be any sort of an options menu or configuration level. Now see, there's a second way to get past that panel safely, which I thought was pretty clever. The way the level starts off, the default arrangement makes you think, oh, I can just bop that cop up the backside of the head. That must be how they want me to solve it, but nope. Oh, now who's this character? He has white gloves, white tie, white beard. Bam! Shot. Dead. Now again, this is sort of just your participation in unnecessary narrative detail. there is no alternative solution other than to arrange those 2 panels. I'm not really sure how 6 shooters work, but now that one didn't fire. Ball! And swap these so that the truck is in the right spot to catch me. But since the level wouldn't let you progress until you rotated those 2 panels, or moved them rather, you can't see how it would have worked out had you chosen a different path. And again, here, now they're introducing you to the rotating element. You can see that pin in the middle. That means I can't move it with another tile. I can't swap it, but I can rotate it. And so now I'm playing as actually the female character. I just drugged the guy I was playing as. So now she takes whatever it was he had. And now the level moves on to here. I love the animation. It almost makes me wonder if they rotoscoped it. It seems so realistic. And for some reason I can swap these 2, which seems very unlikely. I don't know how a drugged detective or spy is going to just drive away in a taxi cab. But this is the way that the game tells a narrative without using any text. Kind of like a bird story. And again, just rotate. So now I'm playing as the female spy. So I think you've gotten most of the mechanics down now. I'll continue playing as I bring on somebody from the team to talk to us more about how they made Framed. Joining me today all the way from Melbourne, Australia is Loveshack Entertainment's designer, director, and composer for one of my leading candidates for Best Indie Game of 2014, Mr. Adrian Moore. Hello, Adrian.
Hi, Ken. How you doing?
Very good. How are you?
Yeah, pretty good, thank you.
You recovered from the crunch of pushing that game out last month?
Yeah, just about. We were all pretty frazzled for a while. I'm sure anyone that makes games knows what that is like. Yes, we're getting over it now, yeah.
Well, it seems to have been very well received. I hope you're happy with your success.
Yes, we are, thank you. Especially Hideo Kojima mentioning it as his Game of the Year. That was a huge thing for us. We couldn't hardly believe that.
I know, what a shocker that must have been.
Yes, I know. Especially good for Josh, Josh Boggs, who the original concept came from. He's a huge Hideo Kojima fan and grew up playing his games. So for him to have that kind of accolade from Hideo was just mind-blowing. I think he's still in shock, actually.
How was it that you were able to get Framed so recognized? I mean, it has great word of mouth. People are talking about this game, but the mobile gaming market is so crowded. How did you make Framed stand out?
I think it's 2 things, really. I think, firstly, we committed to entering the game into competitions and doing the game shows as much as we could. So we just pushed it out there. From the very beginning, actually, from the very, very beginning, when we've had our first demo, we submitted it to major competitions. And secondly, I think it's probably because there's no other game like it. I think that's probably why it stands out, because it's not like another game. And I think people tend to get quite excited about playing something brand new. So I think those 2 things together have helped us build it up a little bit before it came out.
Speaking of the game's uniqueness, in an interview with Harry Slater of Pocket Gamer, you mentioned that when other people play this game, they smile broadly when they play it for the first time and wonder why this idea hasn't been realized before. Why hasn't this idea been realized before? The only thing even comparable to it that I can think of is Comix Zone, and that came out decades ago for the Sega Genesis, and it wasn't even a puzzle game.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I don't know why someone hasn't done it before. I think, well, I've got to be honest with you, when Josh first pitched the idea to me, there's 3 of us directors of Loveshack, Ollie Brown, Joshua Boggs and myself. Josh pitched it to us and Ollie was very, very quick on the uptake and really sort of got it, but it took me a little while to actually catch on to what it really was, and it was a little bit of a strange thing to get your head around. So it's not really an obvious idea. It's not like, Tetris or something. It's not something where you can just explain it and you just get it. You have to really build it and then you have to experience playing it to really understand how it works. So it's not really, it's quite I can say this because it wasn't my original idea. I think it's quite a clever idea, but also it's a difficult game to make. It's an extremely difficult game to make because every single panel of every single page is handcrafted like a movie scene. If anyone, I imagine, had ideas similar in the past, they might have been put off by actually trying to realise it. I have no idea really, but those are my theories.
One of the works that you cited in influencing Framed was Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud. Can you tell me a little bit more about how that influenced your work?
Well, we've all read that book now. It's a wonderful book, but it was actually, again, it came from the whole thing really started with Josh wanting to tell a story in a brand new way. I think he was a little bit frustrated with the way narrative was being dealt with in games because they're normally two separate things, and he wanted to try and meld them together a bit more. And I think he was on a plane and he was reading Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics book, and it suddenly dawned on him that a comic book or a series of frames on a page, whether it's actually a comic book or not, could be a great way, to specify these different actions and moments. For example, in a normal game, in a standard game, the games that we're used to, a lot of the games we're used to, the player has control and agency over running, jumping, doing all those kind of things, ducking, hiding, those kind of things. But what Josh's original idea was what would it be like if you had all those actions predetermined and laid out on a page, and if you just reordered them and then the scene played out in sequential order, just like a comic book, how would it change things, and could you make a game out of that? So I don't think the game would have happened if that book hadn't been read. It'd be really nice to meet Scott, actually. Obviously a huge influence in this project.
You mentioned that Josh was interested in exploring different ways to tell a story. When I think about comic books, I think of it as a combination of the visual arts and the written art, especially in old Batman comic books, for example, with speech balloons and pow and bam. But in Framed, there is a surprising lack of any spoken or written dialogue. I find that a lot of games nowadays that are trying to pursue narrative, like A Bird Story or Journey, are actually avoiding dialogue entirely. So what was your decision like to not include any text in Framed?
I think mostly it's because once you start doing that, you start pinning things down and you start removing the player's ability to use their imagination, and that was very important for us. We wanted to create something that was an experience. Obviously it has rules, and you can work out how to solve the puzzles by looking at the page, but for example, another thing on that is that the characters themselves don't have very many distinguishing features. You can't really set them apart, their silhouettes. You can tell them by their shape, you can tell that they're who they are, but there isn't a lot of detail in them. And that was another part of that decision, in that if we just have something that's a little bit more like a blank slate that you can project your imagination onto, and combined with not having any text to limit what is really going on, then you have something that I think is a little bit more... I always use the term right brain, that's something that I'm very keen on, is creating stuff that really stimulates your right brain, because that kind of... It's just something that it's always interested me. I'm not really one for reams and reams of text. So I'm explaining this in a very long-handed way, but really it's just to try and keep things in the player's imagination. And as you can tell from the game, as you play it, you can sort of work out what's going on, but there's a lot of things that are open for interpretation, and that's definitely a key tenet of the design of Framed.
One of the things I have found that is open to interpretation is who exactly is the protagonist, who's the good guy. You're constantly changing which character you're playing as, and none of them really seem to have any higher moral ground than the others. So is there a particular hero? Kind of like the old Mad Magazine, Spy versus Spy. They're both the bad guy and they're both the good guy. Is that true for Framed as well?
Yeah, that's deliberate too. Again, we didn't want to just make it too obvious and make it that this is the guy that you should be rooting for, this is the guy that is the villain, and we wanted to try and add some more depth to the characters and have some surprises. So as you play through, there's some little twists in there, and yeah, I can't really talk too much more about that because I don't want to give it away for people, but it's deliberate too, that you don't really know exactly who is the perpetrator of the crime and who is innocent, and who's in on it with who else. And yeah, I'm pretty happy with the way we treated that, with the way that that's come through, I think.
Now, this may be a question for Josh, but this game is very much influenced by noir style. But again, it's a graphic novel, and most people who aren't familiar with the diversity of comic books and graphic novels may associate that genre with superheroes. Did you ever consider a different genre for the setting of Framed?
Actually, it's funny you should mention that, because I questioned it at the beginning. I wasn't quite sure what genre we should go with, but pretty much from the first conversation Josh, Ollie, and myself had, we were just sure that noir was the right thing to do. I think partly because, well, it's the mood, but also we wanted to have something that was a bit more 40s and 50s than doing it in the contemporary modern day. And that leads on to having some interesting opportunities for art and for audio. I think we wanted to try and create something that was a little bit kind of moody, nostalgic, sort of Humphrey Bogart, kind of Hitchcock, that kind of thing, rather than modern day superhero. Who knows what we could do with Framed in the future. I'm not going to give anything away, but that was a core decision from the start to make it a sort of noir style.
Yeah, and the soundtrack is a great complement to that. I saw somebody on Twitter say that he was listening to your soundtrack while programming, which made him feel like a code detective.
Yeah, I saw that too. I'm always very pleased with that, because the music the music has been in development since the beginning of the project as well. So I've put as much effort into the music as Ollie has with the art, or Stu has with the animation, for example. So I'm always very happy when people appreciate it. There's another thing that I really wanted to do. We really wanted to fuse the game mechanics, the art, the animation, and the audio together to create something special, and not, leave the audio till the last minute and sort of tack it on. I wanted to try and do it justice, the music.
I saw on Twitter that you said the full soundtrack is coming soon. Any plans for that?
I can't reveal any dates, but it will be published, yes. There's a whole album's worth of material coming.
Excellent, I'm looking forward to that. So when I was playing the game, I found some of the levels extremely difficult. I really had to stare at them for a long time and play with the different layouts, and it took me forever just to find one solution. Are there some levels that have multiple solutions?
Yes, quite a lot of them have multiple solutions, actually. You might just not have stumbled across them if you've got it right a certain way, you haven't seen the other ways, but that was something that was very keen for us. We were very keen to do from the start too. We didn't want to just have a series of puzzles where there's just one correct way to win it. It was important to do that. So yeah, there's a lot of that in the game.
Well, now I feel even dumber because there are multiple solutions. I could barely find one of them.
Yeah, but some of those puzzles are really tricky. Even though there's a few different outcomes, they're hard to find.
I did find a few levels, especially later in the game, that introduced some new mechanics. I can actually rearrange the tiles almost infinitely and just make the level go on for as long as I was interested in doing so.
Yes, we wanted to do something that made it feel more living, because up until that point you're rearranging the panels and then hitting play, and then the arrangement that you've got is what you've got. But we figured if we tried to do something where you can reuse panels, then it really opens it up, and it means that you're having to swap panels as it's playing out. And that was a challenge, but I'm really happy we did that, because I think it creates a nice, especially because it's near the end of the game, or it's in the last third of the game that you experience that. Hopefully it's a refreshing surprise for players where things kind of bust out a little bit.
Are there any other mechanics you considered incorporating, or which you play tested but ultimately didn't incorporate into the final game?
We had a few. There's a whole bunch of things on paper, but in actual fact we spent enough time on paper working on the design to nail the ones down that we actually implemented. We didn't actually build any other mechanics other than the ones that you could play in the game. I think because actually the game is designed on paper, all the levels are play tested on paper, so we go through this lengthy process outside of the computer and then we build it. So I think we just recognised that the other mechanics we had weren't as strong, so we just stuck with what we've got.
So does that mean if you were to do a sequel, it would be original levels with the same mechanics, or would we see new mechanics, or maybe a new setting?
Anything goes, really. Anything goes. We're really excited because we're talking about all kinds of different ideas now, but I can't give away what we're thinking. But any of the things you just said could come true.
Because some of the reviews I've read say that the game is fairly short. It's actually longer than I expected. I was playing for a while, and I got to a point where I thought the game was over, and it wasn't, and I was so excited because when I first played this game, just like those other first-time players you've encountered, I was literally laughing with delight because I grew up with comic books, Superman and Spider-Man and Knights of the Dinner Table, and it was just so much fun to actually have a role in the story that I was reading, and I would love to see more of this kind of gameplay.
Oh, good. Well, you never know. Like I said, I can't say anything for sure now, but you never know. There may be more coming. But on the length thing, I think it's interesting because we set out from the beginning to make something that was kind of a movie-length experience, which we figured was 90 minutes to maybe 2 hours. And if you're not, exceptionally gifted at the game, it could take you 3 hours to play through. So we were actually quite happy with the length, and it's all handcrafted stuff as well. It's taken over 2 years to develop. So it's interesting that because also I personally can find some games too long, and I would rather they would be kind of short and sweet. It's interesting to hear the different reactions, but we're happy with it.
Now, how does this game tie into your game history? I mean, obviously this is the first game of its kind, but do you have any experience making other kinds of games that helped prepare you to make this one?
Well, I've been in game development since 1994. I'm like the old man of Loveshack. The other two have a fair bit of experience too, but we've made a bunch of things. We actually met and formed a team making a game called Spy Mouse for Firemint. That was where we really sort of gelled as a team. But we go back into all kinds of, like, Ollie's worked for different companies in Australia. I've worked for companies in England like Lionhead and Bullfrog, and my history really is simulation games, things like Theme Hospital, and I worked on the original Populous game. But to answer your question, nothing really was... The Framed was a completely new thing. It could have been made by veterans, it could have been made by someone who's never made a game before, but I think our combined experience, what it did help us do was hopefully create something of quality, because even though it's a completely brand new experience and you can't really relate to other games and say, oh, let's just make it a bit like that, let's make it a bit like that, because everything is completely unique. We did have a combined commitment to quality, and our experience, I think, helped us achieve that. For example, our animator Stu Lloyd, he's a very experienced animator, and I think one of the best in the country, in my opinion. And I feel like Framed wouldn't be the game it is without his animation.
You mentioned some of the games that you've worked on and some of the studios you've been at. You've been, lead designer on the movies, lead designer on Master of the Skies. These are all some big budget, big name titles. Yeah. What is it like to be now working in indie games?
It feels like the old days. When I was working at when I worked at Bullfrog right in the beginning days, it was just a few people. It was just, Peter Molyneux and Glenn Corpus, and they were making Populous, and they were just, hunched over a computer in a little room, and then later on I was working for a company called Small Rockets, and we were making games, 2 or 3 people, and that's personally what I like the most. So it feels a little bit like it's come full circle, but I had the luxury all that time of not worrying about anything else other than just coming to work and making the games, which is difficult in itself, but these days we have to worry about budgets and, marketing and legalities and, all the sort of things that come with running a company. I'm really grateful that I've got Josh and Ollie, because they're really great at that stuff, and, we work on that stuff together. So it's like a mixture of going full circle back to the early days, but with the added bunch of more interesting challenges mixed in with it. But in summary, I would say that it's pretty fantastic. It's a great feeling of freedom. Sometimes the work can be overwhelming, but it's really nice feeling in control of your own destiny. For example, I don't necessarily imagine that Framed would have been greenlit inside a company. I think it would have been like, what the hell's this? And it was very, very brilliant for us. It was a great experience to be making all the decisions creatively all the way along. Every last detail of the game was made just by us 3, and it was really liberating. And I think hopefully the games going, has done itself justice, and it's largely because we got to do what we wanted to do rather than being told by someone that such and such doesn't sell, so you got to put this in it, or you got to do that, or you got to do this. So overall, it's an excellent experience.
When I interviewed Carl Ruloffs, one of the original designers of Shadowgate, he said that making mobile indie games is a lot like the old days, where you're making the game you want to make with a bunch of your friends in your own homes with these devices with extremely limited resolutions and resources.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. And you're not always sure where you're going to get your next paycheck from, but hopefully that'll change.
Yeah, I guess some things don't necessarily change over the decades. It's always been hard to realize your own creative vision without selling out.
Yes, exactly. I do think, though, the times have changed and it's a little bit easier these days. You've got the powerful development tools and with the handheld devices, you don't have to be making a game for a home console. You can be making smaller little things, and I think it's very exciting. I love to. I'm always just get very happy when people pull it off, or when people start projects and they're doing things on their own terms, because that's the way I always think it should be.
So now that Framed has had its success on the mobile market, do you see it coming to other platforms or to the desktop computer?
We're looking at other platforms. We've already announced that it's going to come to desktop computer, actually. It's just a question of when. Other platforms, yeah, we're thinking about it and we're looking at it, but nothing can be confirmed yet. I think it would be a shame not to.
Well, I look forward to seeing it on more platforms, and I look forward to seeing more games like it. If people want to pick up Framed or follow its developers online, where do you recommend they go?
They can go www.framed-game.com. That's probably the best place, yeah. Or follow us on Twitter @Loveshackers.
I gotta ask, where did that name come from, Loveshack? Other than the song.
Very beginning of the company, we brainstormed a bunch of ideas, and we had a load of ideas. We had lots and lots of ideas on paper, but I personally was very keen on it not being something that was kind of techie. I don't know, like computer pixel software or something. Something that was very technical. And we just felt like it had a positive spirit to it, and it just made us think of the B-52 song. So it was written down on a piece of paper, and I picked it out and said that's what we should do, and I think it was Josh's original idea, and Ollie loved it too. And
well, you can't go wrong with the B-52s.
Exactly.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time, sir. I really appreciate it, and thank you again for a great game.
Thank you, Ken. It's been a pleasure talking.